11 a.m. to 12 noon. One solid hour of in-depth analysis of the machinery that makes our country tick. The Edge, cutting into the matters at hand.
Good morning and welcome to The Edge here in ZIZ Radio, 96.1 FM for Friday, May 17, 2024. I'm Devonne, Cornelius, and thank you for tuning into the program for today. In studio with me is Austin Enbaro, Special Advisor in the Prime Minister's Office, and we will be having a conversation about crime in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Yes, generally.
Generally. And before we get into that conversation, we want to play something for you for the benefit of the listeners. It is a podcast from the BBC called The Global Story. EncroChat, the crime family brought down by their violent messages. And so we want you to take some time out to have a listen, and when we come back, we will continue the conversation. It is about 25 minutes, but it is absolutely worth listening. And when we finish, we're going to have a conversation and, of course, give the callers an opportunity to lend their voice to the conversation. Let's have that played now.
Global Story. Monday to Friday, we focus on one story in detail with the help of the BBC's best journalists. Today, a seat at the table of Europe's top crime bosses. In 2020, law enforcement agencies across Europe were given an incredible opportunity when French police managed to blow open the highly encrypted phone network, EncroChat. That allowed crime agencies across Europe to see more than 100 million messages exchanged amongst high-level criminals, an unprecedented bank of evidence against some of the continent's most notorious drug dealers, money launderers, and people smugglers. Now, the BBC has gained access to 10,000 of those messages relating to one crime family in the British city of Liverpool. On this episode, we hear how two brothers instilled fear through chilling violence and how their plots for revenge, planned by phone, ultimately stopped them in their tracks. With me is Brona Munro, our reporter who's been investigating this story for the BBC's Panorama programme.
Good morning. Hello.
Now, you are sharp-eyed, sharp-eared, and you know a lot about crime. So, in terms of crime reporting, where does this story fit in? Like, how big is it?
Well, to use the words of the experts that we've been speaking to, they say it is the biggest law enforcement operation of a generation. So we spoke to Matt Horn, who was the UK lead in terms of organising the EncroChat operation that took place. And he said it was a game changer.
And it gave the whole of the law enforcement community an unparalleled access to the inner workings of organised crime in a way that was completely unprecedented and at almost industrial scale.
For the first time, law enforcement in countries across the world were getting a seat at the table with criminals. And when I say a seat at the table, I mean they were in the inner sanctum because they were inside the phones of the criminals, and they were literally hearing and seeing every single thing those criminals were doing to run their organisation.
So when you say inside the phones, I mean, it's intriguing, isn't it? Let's talk about EncroChat, because some of our listeners may have heard of EncroChat and some may not have. But as you say, I mean, it was so fundamental in terms of the opportunities it created for law enforcement. So seeing as well as hearing, presumably these are photos. Tell us, first of all, what is EncroChat?
EncroChat was an encrypted telephone communication system used by approximately 60,000 people worldwide. Most of them were criminals, and most of the usage of the phone was for criminal enterprise. So this was just like a normal handset that you wouldn't have looked twice at, but only the real top-tier criminals got access to them. They were almost like a status symbol for the criminals that used them. It was one of a number of encrypted communication systems that were on offer worldwide, but it was the one that piqued the interest of the French and the Dutch and the English. And it was those countries that eventually then took down that communication system.
It had something called a duress code. Is that right, Bruna?
So if at any point the criminal that had this phone was stopped, what they could do is tune it in to work like another phone, so that if anybody took the phone, they would never know that it was actually an encrypted device. But what it also had was another code that could be entered by the criminal. And the minute that that code was entered, it completely wiped and disabled the phone. So if they were stopped and they were quick thinking, this criminal would, by all intents and purposes, be compliant, type in the PIN number, and yet what he was actually doing was erasing any trace of criminality from his phone. They basically thought that this system was untouchable and unbreakable.
You're saying that quite matter-of-factly, but, watching your documentary where, at various points you have on the screen the messages that were exchanged between really high-level criminals. I mean, sometimes I exclaimed out loud, like, I don't believe it. I mean, so comfortable to say, well, everything from, basically ordering an attack on a rival criminal organisation to chatting about the son's birthdays or, taking selfies with fast cars.
I mean, I've worked in crime now for over 20 years, and I would go so far as to say it takes a lot to shock me, But I have not stopped reading these 10,000 messages that we got since the day we got them. And I still can't believe how they talked about killing people.
I want to rip him apart with my hands, head, legs, teeth. Then we decide whether we slash him, chop his fingers off, or whatever. Slashed across the face and smashed his eyes in and took half an ear and tongue.
How they intermingled that with talking about having the kids over and having a bouncy castle out the back.
If these crime bosses, as we know from these messages, felt so comfortable, how was it compromised?
It's just extraordinary. It's really genius, really. The law enforcement agencies in France and the Netherlands became aware of this EncroChat system. And what they did was place some malware in the communication system. And what that did was it drew down all of the messages that had been stored on the devices. Now, we are talking hundreds of millions of messages from international criminals. And it literally laid bare how they did business. Anything from organising international drug smuggling to hiring hitmen, to travel arrangements, everything. When those messages were drawn down by the French and the Dutch, they then passed them to the relevant organisations within countries. So the National Crime Agency, the UK National Crime Agency, they were passed hundreds of millions of messages about UK criminals. And then they disseminated them to the regional law enforcement officers that would deal with each of these criminals.
And then, as I understand, there was an urgency to it about acting within a certain time window. Why was that?
So when the law enforcement agencies got access, they knew that they would be under pressure because it would only take so long before they began to see and hear things that they would have to act on. For example, there was threats to life happening within these messages that they couldn't ignore. So they were constantly working to disrupt those threats to life that were happening in the messages. But they also knew that it was only a matter of time before the telecommunications network itself, EncroChat, realised that there was a problem. So the police were actively trying to disrupt the criminals' behaviour. They then obviously were becoming suspicious. And then after that 6-week period, it was June 13th, the encryption network sent a message out to all its users to say that the system had been hacked. They had to turn down their phones and smash them, get rid of them, destroy them, because they had been rumbled, essentially. On that morning in June, when all of these highly sophisticated criminals, top-tier criminals, got that message to say the phone has been hacked, I would give anything to be a fly on the wall that day, because I've spoken to criminals in that world, and there's just so many stories of criminals telling me that they were, first of all, aghast that it had been hacked because they really thought they were untouchable. And then the next thing is sheer panic. So there was handsets being thrown in the river, there was handsets being smashed, and the next thing was happening was suitcases were being packed and some were fleeing. Others were sitting tight because they couldn't quite believe that they'd been hacked. So they were almost of the attitude, sit as quiet as a mouse and maybe they don't get me. None of the criminals had any idea just how much they had been infiltrated and how much information the police had on them. And it was only months later, when the arrests started to roll out, that criminals actually understood how big the breach was.
It's been called the biggest and most significant law enforcement operation ever carried out in the UK. And it all centres around this, what looks like a normal...
What was happening was that they were being convicted on their own words. They were literally being caught by their own words, which is an extraordinary tool for law enforcement to have.
I mean, extraordinary is the word, and I really, obviously, neither of us want to make light of serious crime, but this is going to make one heck of a Hollywood movie at some point. Let's have a look at the family then that you've spent a very long time investigating, Brona. We're looking at approximately 100 million messages on EncroChat across Europe. The BBC got specific access to 10,000 of those, as you've told us, and they have to do an investigation into a particular crime family in the UK. Tell us about them.
So I was looking at this crime family for the last couple of years because they came onto my radar through a young child being killed in Liverpool.
A manhunt is underway in Liverpool after a 9-year-old girl was shot dead. Police have named her as Olivia Pratt-Corbell.
She was caught in the crossfire of a gangland hit, and I started to look at the firm that worked in that area, and they were known as the Heighton firm. The Heighton firm was a highly secretive organised crime group. It was run by two brothers, Francis and Vincent Coggins. They have remained under the radar for 30 years. One of the brothers, Vincent Coggins, was based in the UK, and he ran their operations. The brother, Francis Coggins, hasn't yet been arrested and is believed to be on the run. These two brothers were in charge of an international top-tier drug trafficking operation. And I worked and worked in the area to try and get people to help me identify them or tell me what they were doing. It was just a wall of silence, and we couldn't quite figure out how they'd been caught because they're so highly secretive. And then we realised that it was the EncroChat hack, and we realised that there was the potential to get these 10,000 messages. The trials lasted 4 years, and the last trial started just very recently. And in that trial, because that person didn't plead guilty, we got access to some of the evidence that was going to be used to convict him. That's where these 10,000 messages come from, and that's how we found out. First, the ferociousness and the violence of this organised crime gang, and two, just how top tier they were and what level they worked at.
When you talk about the violence here, I mean, as a Brit myself, I think perhaps we think of UK crime stories as quite tame compared to some other international crime stories, but we're not talking about low levels of crime and violence here, are we, in this case?
No, I don't think that anybody can be under any illusions about how organised crime works in any country. You know, they have access to weapons, hand grenades, Scorpio machine guns, Glocks, an endless supply of them. You know, an endless supply also of young people trying to get into that criminal world that are willing to commit murder and commit the most serious acts of violence. That world cannot operate unless there's violence. And I've been working in crime for 20 years, and I don't think I've come across an organisation quite as ferocious as this organised crime group. I mean, you have a boss who we name in the programme that we've made to have been involved in at least one murder. He strenuously denies this, of course. You also have his relationship with an enforcer. And this enforcer, we've connected to 2 potential murders. He scalped a woman, and when he did that, he shouted Apache. You know, this is the way these men do business. And one of their modus operandi, if you want to call it that, is that rather than go straight to the person they want to get at, they would go to the family members of that person, and they would commit acts of violence on the family member in order to punish or get to that person. Even criminals from that world were, I would say, disgusted at what this group of criminals were prepared to do.
I mean, these men have, as you explain in your reporting, a long history of crime. It kind of goes quiet around them, partly because nobody speaks. But there's a sense that perhaps they were protected from the inside as well. And that's something also that EncroChat has helped reveal.
We saw repeatedly messages that these big crime bosses had a potential police insider that they contacted to give them information on what the police were actually doing and gathering on them. And that gives them an advantage. It lets them know if they're on police's radar. And you see repeatedly through the messages the crime boss asking for a printout or a readout. And what he wanted to know from this police insider was, what do the police have on me? Do I need to get offside? Do I need to be worried? And although you do not see anything being handed over, the messages clearly allude to information having been handed over in the past.
Can your mate properly look into things on file? Ask him to go deep. Computer man saying tons of new stuff on my file.
What you see is them constantly asking him for the information. He's saying life in the office is too difficult because someone else has just been caught doing the same thing, so he can't take his phone out and take a picture. So it just tells you operationally they were very shrewd, that they knew that they needed to stay one step ahead.
So, we've looked at how EncroChat operated, how it was cracked by French police and information shared with colleagues abroad, including the UK. And now I want to see how it is that law enforcement zoned in on the Highton firm. This is The Global Story. We bring you one big international story in detail 5 days a week. Follow or subscribe wherever you listen. With me today is investigative reporter Brona Munro. We're talking about the Highton firm, this crime firm, these 2 brothers in particular, based in Liverpool in the United Kingdom. Just before we move on, though, I just want to emphasise this, based in Liverpool in the UK, but this was a crime family that spread internationally. This is international crime we're talking about here.
Absolutely. When you talk about drug crime in the UK, you cannot have a group that's successful without some kind of an international footprint, because they have to traffic the drugs. And this crime organisation were no different. They had footholds in Spain from the early 90s, where they moved themselves to start their business. They were importing cigarettes from China. They had people in Cartagena. They had someone based in the Netherlands that were looking after containers. They had someone in North Africa who was working with them to throw drugs onto their shipment to get it into the UK. So they had their fingers in many pies.
So, Brona, the Highton firm, these 2 brothers that you were telling us about, In the EncroChat messages that you've seen, it focuses on one particular episode that's being used in evidence against them now. Can you tell us what the event was that started it all off?
This all started in May 2020. Now, for context, this is lockdown.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
So people can't move as freely as they would move. They can't meet as freely as they would meet. And the criminals were more and more being driven to use the phones. So what happens is that 3 masked men arrive at one of the crime group's stash houses, and a 4th is pretending to deliver a parcel. And what they do is they rob the drugs at that stash house, and it's £1 million worth of cocaine belonging to the Heighton firm, the Coggins brothers. When they get inside, they attack the 2 men minding the drugs with a machete and an axe. And there's a trail of blood all over the house when the police turn up.
103 at scene. Hello? Please. Right, so what injuries have you got, mate? Just sit yourself down.
And so our story unfolds almost in a way that the robbery unfolds.
Any idea who's responsible for it? Are you in dispute with anyone? Have you upset anyone lately, or has anybody got a bit of beef with you? Any information's better than nothing.
A couple of hours later, they realise their drugs have been taken, and the 2 brothers in charge are discussing how dare anybody come and rob their stash house. Such is their reputation. In their thirst to get revenge, they basically set forth a series of messages organising how they're going to kill these men.
Took me 3 days to find out who it was. We go to war. I'm going to kill him and his firm.
So in one exchange, after the robbery has taken place, the crime boss messages his enforcer, and his enforcer comes back and says,
I'll kill him with you, mate. So when the dust settles, how many people you want killed? 4 dead men walking.
And then there's an exchange between the 2 about, have they got enough guns to do that? Do they have the people available? And do they have the cars? And what they clearly decide is they've got everything they need to operationally carry it out, but they're just going to let the situation cool off a bit before they do what they're going to do.
When the time is right, we smash them. I'll kill them in a few months when it's all calmed down.
At the same time, you've got the police sitting outside that world watching it happen. So you've got the police knowing that this ever-increasing threat to life is happening. But what happens is that they identify the wrong people, and they set out to kill a father and son who they decide have robbed the stash house. And what you see is the police trying to actively prevent the killing of these 2 men. No one is ever killed. No one is ever convicted of murder or attempted murder because the police have disrupted it, and they claim that this is all bravado. The man that they've accused is so frightened of the Heighton firm, he basically agrees to sign over his house and pay for the stolen drugs simply because he's so frightened of these brothers.
My solution involves me and me alone paying the bill. I would never go back on my word. It's all over if money paid, I promise you.
So off the back of the stash house robbery, in total over 30 serious criminals have now been convicted. The people that robbed the stash house, the Coggins brothers and their firm who seeked retribution to get their drugs back. You also have the people that bought the drugs, the people that moved those drugs on to be sold, and you have the people who imported the drugs. So you have this sprawling network of criminals, and they've received over 350 years of prison sentence as a result of it.
These messages on EncroChat used in evidence against criminals, including these guys in the UK, they felt very comfortable on EncroChat, but they didn't use their own names despite that.
So the EncroChat system was designed to be anonymous. So some of the handles that we came across were Moonlit Boat. That was Vincent Coggins. He was the crime boss. Another one was Mixed Jet. That was his brother Francis Coggins. So those handles give the user a level of anonymity which helps people when it comes to court, because one of the main things that you find now in the court cases that are coming off the back of EncroChat is that you have to systematically prove who owned what handle. And so, helpfully, some of the criminals would send photographs of themselves. In our case, they handed out their date of births because they wanted a police readout. They sent photographs of their coffee machines. They talked about cooking their crispy duck. And, you know, they did all of that side by side with talking about murder and half-ton deals.
There is one potentially significant spanner in the works, though, isn't there, Brona? Because some of those convicted elsewhere in the UK have disputed whether the EncroChat evidence is actually legal.
Well, first off, the criminals themselves are wholly unsatisfied at the way that these messages were gathered. They say the system was hacked and that these were taken in live time. They were intercepted, and as such cannot be used as evidence, can only be used as intelligence. For example, if you had a wiretap, often law enforcement agencies would put listening devices into cars, into houses, anywhere really. And if that information is taken, 1,000 years of imprisonment of criminals, these were the criminals that the police normally couldn't get to because they're so far up the food chain that it's almost impossible to get them. Even if this didn't result in the arrest of these criminals, what it did was it laid bare how they did business in a way that was unprecedented. It gave supply routes, how they shipped, how they flew stuff, where their points of contact were, in which countries, how they were smuggling stuff through the ports. In terms of the intelligence, the benefit will go on for years to come.
Brona, thank you so much. You've opened up a whole new world. Thanks for your time.
Not at all. Thank you.
For listeners in the UK, you can find details of Brona's Panorama episode, The Crime Bosses Who Terrorised a City, in our show notes. If you're elsewhere in the world and want to hear more about EncroChat, search for the BBC's fascinating 6-part series, Catching the Kingpins, wherever you...
Welcome back to The Edge here on ZIZ Radio, 96.1 FM. If you may have tuned in late, you were listening to The Global Story, a podcast by the BBC, and it focused on the crime family brought down by their violent messages, where they used a communication channel called EncroChat, where primarily it was used in the UK for...
across Europe.
Across Europe, yes, across Europe. Thank you for that. For criminals to communicate and organize crime.
Exactly, and it was encrypted.
Mm-hmm. And so even if you get the information from it, if you get it illegally, quote unquote, they're saying it's not admissible in court and you can't use the information. That has since gone down, according to my report. It says defunct in June of 2020 and founded in 2016. And so they used this communication network to organize their crime. And after listening to this podcast, Mr. Edinburgh, it shed some light on how criminals think and how criminals, you would listen, you would hear when the lady referred to them, or the man, I think, as a firm.
As a firm.
And so criminals don't just get up today and say, I'm going to kill somebody today, or I'm going to have contraband or illegal drugs or what have you. It is well thought out.
As a matter of fact, Devon, these two brothers that they focused on in this particular podcast, they operated for 30 years. Mm-hmm. The system, the communication system that was built, it required anonymity. So in other words, no names,
right?
No real names are to be. You have to provide a handle. So it's obvious that who put the money into creating this encrypted communication system
for that
were
purpose.
criminals.
Yeah.
They were criminals themselves,
right.
And that is why they were so comfortable, because they know what they created, and so they started even giving away their own identity. But the thing is, you see, Devon, for me, and before I delve into that, let me just refer to something with that President Biden said recently with respect to marijuana, cannabis. And the point is, for me, he's even coming after our Prime Minister here. Because, of course, what happens at the federal government, it says President Joe Biden is officially moving forward with plans to loosen federal marijuana restrictions, or lessen. Biden announced on Thursday this administration plans to reclassify cannabis from the most restrictive category on the federal list of illegal drugs to a moderately restrictive category. They're moving it from category 1 down to category 3. But one of the things he said, or one of the things he has moved to do, is to pardon persons who had minor marijuana conviction. That is something that we have done here. That is something that the Prime Minister here has spoken to in terms of expunging the records of persons who were just charged with possession. And so this is to say that obviously what the Prime Minister did in that regard is something that the leader of the biggest economy in the world is now considering doing. But let me just also link now this, continue to link this EncroChat to what is happening in St. Kitts. I want people to also realize that you're talking about large European countries, and they were communicating across the globe, so other countries across the world were involved as well. But EncroChat was set up in Europe. And these large countries, far more resourced with human, finance, and technology resources than small and little St. Kitts and Nevis. People are operating for 30 years, and the police can't find them. People are planning today to commit murders 2 and 3 months down the line when the heat cools off. This is not different to the way the criminals behave. This one in particular, the revenge killing, is not different to the way the criminals behave here. And so that's why I want to say to people that what is happening now is not as a result of what is happening now. It's as a result of what was created under the peace program, when they had the ability to get finance, huge amount of it, that they could use to buy friends and influence people in authority.
You have a situation, Mr. Edinburgh, and I listened to the podcast where it mentioned advanced weapons, where they have weapons that are more powerful than those of the security forces. You have people, young people, who are, instead of trying to get a job to earn for themselves and their families and try to make a positive contribution to the economy, they're trying to get into the criminal
They're lining up. Those were the words. They're lining up to get into this world.
They want to become criminals. They're saying, I want to be a criminal. I want to be a part of a gang. I want to be a part of the firm. That is sad.
The reason for that, and that has happened here, Devonne, in St. Kitts and Nevis. I mean, even the former ACP Adams said that. The thing is that when you glorify it, when you normalize it, then people don't have a problem getting into it. And because it pays more, even though it's only a short-term glorification, which most likely will end up in your death, they don't care about that. Because they care about the now. And it's going to give them money, and lots of it, in a quick time. And so that is why, not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, but globally, young people line up to get into it. Because they think that they can just get into it, make some quick money and get out. But they don't let you out. Because you have information that they are not going to allow you to leave with.
Right. And I think this is what some people don't understand. They don't know. And it's really sad. But listening to this and hearing what happened in the international world, how are we so sure that it is not happening here?
Well, on a smaller scale, it is happening.
Right. That's the point I'm trying to make.
It is happening on a smaller
Criminals
scale.
don't just get up and go out and do it.
If you look, there's nobody who is involved in a gang, especially at a high level, somebody with influence in gang that do not have an iPhone. They do not buy Samsung, because the police could get into Samsung and harvest the messages. You can't do it with an iPhone. And so they buy them. And the police, I've said to the police, tell the people. Let the people know what difficulty you're facing, because you can't take intelligence into court. And you heard it came out in this podcast.
Yes.
You have to take evidence.
Evidence.
And one of the things that the society provides to criminals as well is the cover of, it was the information was unlawfully obtained. So because you don't meet a societal standard, and I don't believe that you must bang anybody to get information, because I'll never be for it. But because you don't meet a certain societal standard of getting the information, the court throws it out. And the criminals who you have that wealth of information on about the heinous acts that they're committing walk free. Is society help in creating these problems? And so crime fighting must be a whole of society approach. In St. Kitts and Nevis, when I was a boy, Devonne, you couldn't get no upstanding girl as your girlfriend if you didn't have a certain level of intelligence. I'm not going to say education, but you had to have a certain level of intelligence and knowledge. But right now, I'm telling you, people in the highest paid jobs are having gangsters, and not just women. Men are doing it too, because there are lots of women gangsters. But I'm saying people in the highest paying jobs are becoming sexually involved with gangsters, one way or the other. And you know what?
And
that
funding
provides?
them.
Yeah, but let me tell you what that provides. More than the funding, because gangsters are going to use the nefarious means of getting money. But what that provides them with is a cover that is hard to crack. Because that's where the person, and so a lot of them have been secret to, because they don't want the police to know, so the police will target that person. And so when you are involved with somebody like that, they're going to use you. That is where they begin to abuse you now. Because once they have you, they will threaten you. And so you have to allow them to store their goods in your property, whether it is drugs or money or guns.
And for them, they would think that would be the perfect cover.
Because, yeah, of course, well, it is a hard cover to crack, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
As a former police officer who always have a police mind, it is a hard cover to crack. Because if you don't know that person is affiliated with them, then it comes a case that even if you find out, the society will say, well, because unless you go in there and find something, police society is going to cry shame on you, the police, for harassing this upstanding person. Simply because you feel like, or simply because he or she has a relationship. And so that is the constraints that law enforcement operate within. The society provide those constraints. And until the society come together as a whole to fight crime, we're not going to get anywhere. Because when you embolden the nefarious mind, they become more nefarious.
We have been asking for an all-of-society approach for quite some time, Mr. Edinburgh. And going back to the same podcast, what jumped out at me is that the criminals can't operate on their own.
No.
It's just like when you run a business, you more than likely would have business partners, and they would help to support your business.
Exactly.
And so for criminals...
And customers.
Right. They can't operate on their own. They need resources. And so when they tap into those covers that you made mention of, that's the resources for them.
Of course.
When they get money, that's the resources for them.
Exactly.
I made the point, I think it was yesterday, that you can't on one hand say crime is getting out of control, and the law enforcement and government or what have you need to do more to address crime. But on the other hand, you are acting as a cover. You are one of the resources for the same criminals. And I made the point, with no apology, that if you are doing that, you are a hypocrite.
Well, I'll say that once you know, but some people don't even realize what they're doing. And then a lot of them now become paralyzed by fear. Because once they're going to openly use you to your face, not to the world.
Right.
They're going to first intimidate you. That came out in the podcast, not in the same way, but the fact that if they want to go after somebody, they go after their family members to instill fear. One of the things that does is to suppress evidence.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean,
is because people would ask themselves the real question, and being real here is either my life or the evidence.
Let me say this, because I know you're going to have to take a break and go to the phone, but let me just say this. The government recently in Parliament passed a bill increasing the penalties
for firearms.
And I'm telling you that upstanding people making noise about it. And one of the argument is, increasing the penalty does not bring down crime. It does not serve as a deterrent. So, but because you think so, and I say you think so, the government should do nothing. So then the government should lower it then. If you think that increasing it ain't going to deter crime, do you think lowering it? And that's what I ask one of them. Do you think lowering it will deter crime? Let me tell you what needs to happen. And I do accept the face of the argument that on its own, the increase of penalty on its own, will not bring the kind of intervention that we're looking for.
Yes.
So we have to do the other things. And if that was their discussion, I would say, of course. But something is going to happen. And I don't think it's time, this is not the time to speak about it, because it's still in the works. And even this, one of the other things they said is that this is a reaction, and I'm saying no. Last year, I think that sitting was around June, when the Attorney General spoke about the intent in Parliament to bring these new regulations to deal with the scourge of crimes. So this is part of a plan. The increase in the penalties, there's going to be something to do with the court. Two bills are going to be passed. One of them is judge-only trial, because too many witnesses and jurors are being intimidated.
Yes. And from you have that, Mr. Edinburgh, then your case is.
I'm just saying. Because somebody might say it's a knee-jerk reaction again when those bills come. So I'm saying no. It's part of a plan, and there are other things that will happen to bring society on board. We are looking to have a crime-fighting machinery that is government-led and society-driven.
We have to take a break, Mr. Edinburgh. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation by opening the phone line. Just take this short break, and we will be right back.
Reach for DPH Cough and Cold for all your cold and flu symptoms, relief, rest, and ready again. Also available in children's formulation.
The future is unknown. Protect your life, your family, and your valuables from unforeseen circumstances. Let National Caribbean Insurance give you the peace of mind that you so deserve. At NCI, we offer a suite of affordable insurance plans that can be tailored to ease your financial burden. We aim to deliver exceptional products to satisfy all your insurance needs. Whether life, health, motor, or property insurance, NCI has the right solution for you. Our friendly and knowledgeable sales professionals are ready and able to assist you. Let National Caribbean Insurance Company Limited help you to prepare for the unexpected. We serve, we protect, we satisfy. That's NCI.
Get ready, St. Kitts and Nevis, for the first annual Jesus in the City Parade and Festival on Saturday, May 18th, 2024 at the Warner Park Stadium. Celebrate love for God and love for people throughout the city with festive floats, live gospel bands, choirs, costumes, banners, and paraders filling the streets of downtown Bastille with praise and worship. The opening festivities kick off at 11 a.m. with a parade leaving Warner Park Stadium at 12 noon, moving along city streets and returning to the stadium for a grand gospel concert celebration. Enjoy music featuring special international guest artists, local bands, food, and festivities for the whole family. Come lift up the name of Jesus in the city on Saturday, May 18th, 2024. To register your church, enter a float, secure a vendor booth, or to become a sponsor, visit jesusinthecity.com or call 662-8911.
Jesus in the city, Lord's in the air.
Devonne the Promoter and SKN Carnival Sugar Mass 53 presents.
Listen.
St. Kitts and Nevis 2024 Carnival Comedy Show. Performing live. Major High. Also featuring Megan Samaras. Location, Carnival Village, December 7th, 2024. A night full of laughter. Showtime 8 p.m. Early bird special ends September 1st. Tickets on sale now at Jad Cash and online at eventbrite.com. Contact Devonne the Promoter for more info. Email delvinnf12@gmail.com.
From the heart of ZIZ Radio comes a political talk show like no other. The Edge, with host Devonne Cornelius giving you his take on the biggest stories happening in governance today. Got something to say? Let's hear it. Give us a call at 869-465-2555, Monday to Friday from 11 a.m. to 12 noon. One solid hour of in-depth analysis of the machinery that makes our country tick. The Edge, cutting into the matters at hand.
Welcome back to The Edge here in ZIZ Radio, 96.1 FM. I'm your host, Devonne Cornelius, and in studio with me is Austin Edinburgh, Special Advisor in the Prime Minister's Office. We are speaking on crime generally. We want to open the phone lines now and begin taking your calls at 465-2555 or 718-577-2916. Those are the numbers you call. We're also live on our social media platforms, the Facebook and YouTube, and of course on TV. In the meantime, Mr. Edinburgh, and we have practically 10 minutes, we're going to continue this conversation. And the same, we have a caller, so we're going to have a stick up in. But before we take that one quickly, okay, let's take this call. Caller, good morning, you're on the air.
I thought it was Edinburgh Coffee.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
All right.
You know, I'm glad they said it. Because see, that's a threat. I've been threatened before. Every time you dare to speak truth to power on what is happening with crimes in St. Kitts, somebody wants to threaten to kill you. It's the very thing that we were discussing, Devon. The very thing that we were discussing here. They're upset because they want to make a lot of money by committing crimes or by doing nefarious things. And you must just take the money and give them because you fear them. But that's okay. I would rather die a free man than to live in our jail. Hope you understand that.
We have any more callers on the line? The phone lines remain open though. Call us at 465-2555 or 718-577-2916. So back to the podcast, Mr. Edinburgh, and I was taking notes of some of the things that came out of it. And one of the things was that we touched on was intimidation and trying to silence family members and witnesses. the heartbreaking one of killing of a 9-year-old who was caught in the crossfire, and message or police insiders or people in high places, giving information on what the police are doing. We have some callers, so let's head to the phone and we'll take this call. I want to give them the opportunity to get in as we are practically out of time. But this is a conversation that we definitely need
We have to come back to. We have to continue the conversation.
Now that I have this, I will be going through and listening to all of these podcasts. Let's take this call. Hello, caller. Good morning. You're on the air. Okay, we lost that caller. We have any more callers? Okay, please try to, when you call in, make your point and allow another caller to get in. So, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, but when you were speaking about the being caught in the crossfire, the 9-year-old.
Yes.
And, these things happen all over the world. Innocent people. But that's an innocent child.
Yeah.
And I can't, yesterday on Freedom, Elder Eli called in, and he said that he's putting out a call to put pregnancy on pause. No, he's all right. And I understand clearly what he said.
He said the same thing here.
Yeah,
as well.
but I'm just saying, because you see, and this is how I assess what he said. What he's saying is that what is happening now is so vile and vicious that it is not a nice environment in which to bring new innocent lives. That is what he's saying. And you listen to that woman, because a female who want to threaten me with death. I have not called anybody's name. And if I have to, I will not. I'm afraid of that. I have not. All I'm speaking about is what was said in the podcast. And I'm saying how criminals get protection within the society. And she has a problem with that. So she's either a gangster or somebody who's providing protection for a gangster. So that's why it would offend her. And, I feel good when it reaches that in that way.
I think we have a caller on the line, 465-2555. Let's take this call. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. When it comes to crime, this is how I see it, right? Many of us profess to believe the Bible, but we go against the Bible and still we get what we don't expect because we go against the Bible. What does the Bible say about people who deliberately get up and kill people and want to live? What the Bible say about that? They kill people and then they run away because they want their life to be spared. But they're going to kill one, they're going to kill two, they're going to kill three, and they're going to continue killing. And they live. The Bible doesn't say that. And unless we go by what the Bible says, this will continue and it will get worse. That's all I have to say.
All right, caller, thank you for your contribution. Okay. Let's take this other call. Okay, we lost that one. We have any more callers on the line? I think we can facilitate at least one more call before we begin to wrap up. 465-2555 or 718-577.
What I'm understanding, the other caller is saying that she wants the state to kill people. She wants the hanging to be, this moratorium and hanging to end.
There was a conversation we had here on the surface about that in terms of the death penalty. And I think with the caller making that comment, I think it is a conversation that we need to have, definitely.
We need to have it. Yeah. We need to have it. And you see, I'll tell you why a lot of people don't want to have it. Because of things like what the first caller said. People are so fearful. That is what that system called peace did to people. Put them under fear And I could tell you, because when I challenged it, I was threatened.
There are people who are... We have a call on the line?
It appears that we have a call on the line.
Okay, it's 11:57. We'll take just one more call. Let's take this call. Caller, quickly, go ahead. We're soon out of time. Go ahead.
Devonne,
Yes, go ahead.
everybody's speaking about crime. Who are the criminals? That's one thing, right? Okay, then next business now. All hands on deck. All hands on deck. When some people say they're not going to be speaking to other people, how we going to get all hands on deck? And this coming from the top office then. Yeah.
All right, caller. Thank you for your contribution. Mr. Edinburgh, we have 2 minutes. Let's go.
Yes. So let me say this, Devon, in wrapping up. This is a whole of society approach. If you want to be pessimistic and be accusatory of other people, then point the fingers back at you. You take the step, because I've always been, when it comes to crime fighting, an all of society approach. In 1988 or 89, when I was in the Youth Council, I led, and Pam was in power, not a party of my choice, but I led a campaign for the Youth Council against crime that we had called the New Crime Wave. And it was successful in bringing the public's attention to what was happening in our culture. And persons came on board and helped the police with crime fighting. Unless the society is on board, we're not going to get anywhere. And it's unfortunate that there's so much fear in the society. I'm not angry with them. I empathize with them.
There's a lot of fear.
Because there's a lot of fear from what is happening with these gangsters. The podcast referred to it when the journalist said that when she tried to speak to persons in the community about that particular crime family, there was a deafening silence.
Yes.
Nobody would speak. And it is out of fear. So if that's a society you want, remember it is the one that you created. And therefore, stop blaming others. I am here and I'm ready to lead, as always, in the fight against crime. I call on you, and you, to join me.
Mr. Edinburgh, we are out of time. We're going to have to bring this program to a close for our midday newscast. But thank you for joining me, and we want to continue this conversation. So
of course we will.
We'll have a conversation next week to decide when we're going to come back and continue the conversation, and of course hear more from the callers. You've been listening to The Edge here at ZIZ Radio 96.1 FM for Friday, May 17, 2024. Coming up next is our midday newscast. Stay tuned. Have a good one. Bye-bye.